This is Coder Radio, episode 28 for December 17th, 2012. Hi everyone, you're listening to Coder Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show, taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and related technologies. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, Michael Dominic. Hey there, Michael.
Hello, Chris, and welcome to the No Spin Zone.
Welcome, and good morning to you, sir. How are you doing? Because I gotta tell you, it is a windy Washington morning over here. If I drop off, I think it's safe to assume I've lost power. But I felt like I couldn't just come on and complain about that after what you've been through in recent weeks. Like, it didn't really seem to add up, didn't stack up quite as much.
Yeah, we built up an immunity.
Yeah.
It's actually very dreary here. It looks like what I imagine London looks like.
All right, so what are we going to talk about today? Because I have a couple of things that are up my craw this morning. I'm wondering if we're going to get to them. What's going on?
Well, we're going to talk about all your favorites. Of course, the Nexus Q.
Right.
I'm teasing. We're going to talk about another retrospective, our favorite either tools or products with the development spin of 2012.
Awesome. And of course, we've also got our batch of email. I should mention before I forget, since it's on the front of our mind,
Sure.
Those of you on the live stream know this, but we're going to record an extra episode this week since we won't be actually live next week, to make room for the holidays. But we'll have an episode for you, and we're going to record that this Wednesday. So if you don't normally get a chance to join us, maybe this will be a chance for you. Wednesday the 19th at our regular 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. We're going to do a special indie gaming-focused episode of Coder Radio. And then we'll release that at our regular time next week on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
Yes. But with the business done, should we start with the feedback?
Let's burn through it. So Michael writes in wanting to know, why do I like GitHub better than code.google.com? I have a very simple answer. GitHub's pretty, code.google.com isn't.
Well, there's also a lot more community, right?
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
there's if I need a library, I can search GitHub, and actually they have a great, search by the programming language, and I'm very likely to find something that is still being maintained. One thing I find on code.google.com is a lot of people have left there in favor of GitHub. Oh. So sometimes things are a bit out of date.
I mean, I see plenty of stuff on code.google.com.
Yeah.
I just code.google.com I think is more prevalent in the open source community, but with GitHub, you'll almost see people use that as their portfolio.
Yeah, and that's actually a common thing I heard. Oh, do you have a GitHub link?
Yeah.
So it's one of those. Honestly, I don't see a reason not to use it, other than cost. But I think I've mentioned a few times I use Bitbucket for most closed source projects, just because of the way GitHub builds versus the way Bitbucket handles that. Anyway, so moving along, David wants to know our thoughts on the new Dell XPS 13 Developer Edition.
Yeah, that's their new Ultrabook.
Yes.
And you, I would think, probably have a few thoughts on this.
I do. So I have the version lower.
The Sputnik preview one they had.
Yeah, I had the one below this. It's a good machine. So looking at what they've put out, it's a bit more pricey than mine was.
Oh.
But it's also like double the storage and more RAM.
Yeah, they upped the processor.
Better. Yeah, they upped everything.
And the SSD.
Only thing they didn't up was the screen, and that's really its weakest point, unfortunately.
Yeah, this to me, it is sort of an unfortunate disadvantage. It's oh gosh, do you remember what it is off the top of your head? I know it's probably listed on here.
I don't know.
It's the cheap 720p where it's like 1330 by 768 or something like that.
I can tell you, switching between my Air and the Dell, it's very noticeable.
Mm-hmm.
After a few minutes, you'll get used to it. But it is not a great
I disagree.
Screen.
I mean, you get used to the limitation, but I have found that it is just... This is why I had to move away from the netbook. To me, it is just impractical with any application. The applications that I use just assume a certain amount of screen real estate is going to be available to them. And I think this is probably the same for an IDE in most cases. I just... Without without a larger screen resolution, I literally cannot fit the stuff I need to use on my screen, and it becomes so frustrating. And when you're busy and you're under the gun and you're billing, I sit there and I think, why the F am I doing this? And to me, it becomes such a killer issue for that machine that the fact that it could have a Core i7, the fact that it has 256 gigabyte SSD, and that it's lightweight, and that it ships running Ubuntu, all become extremely secondary because I just practically can't use it.
Well, Chris, in the pre-show we were talking a bit about my keyboard and why I have a relatively costly keyboard. I have a DOS keyboard. It's one of those things that you don't think about, but the keyboard and the screen you use all the time. It's funny. My friend is buying a laptop. He's agonizing over whether he should get an i7, but he's not even looking at the screen or what type of keyboard layout they have.
Yeah, and something else too, as these laptops kind of get all around the same spec, is then I start to look at other aspects. Like, I really like having my power cord and my main cords come out the back of my laptop where it's just not on the sides. And there's other things you can look at like that I'll go into that kind of stuff. But I think there's a lot of elements people aren't looking at. And as far as this XPS goes, on paper, except for that screen, and you can tell Dell's kind of dodging the issue because here in the specs, they list out it as a 13.3 HD 720p screen. But I remind you, that's not even 1280 by 720, which is genuine 720p. Yeah. That is the 1330 or whatever it is. It is a half 720p. So they're being disingenuous just in the specs, and that's a bad sign.
Now, having said that, I actually do like the XPS 13.
I suppose if you're doing what, email and
wow.
Oh no, wait, what? I'm just wondering what use cases you had for it. I mean, what, email, web browsing?
So I dual booted Windows 8 and what's it called?
I bet I bet Metro looks great on that screen actually because Metro
no design.
And I'll tell you, on really high resolution screens, it really does not take advantage of the screen.
Yeah. All kidding aside, to be fair, like Visual Studio and Eclipse, it did feel cramped, right? Because I was running Eclipse on Ubuntu and Visual Studio and Windows, obviously. I get what you're saying about. I
actually feel like Windows is better at dealing with that than GTK applications under Linux tend to be. So like I feel like that's not even a fair comparison because if I was going to use it to run Windows, it would almost be more usable at lower resolution. I think.
Maybe. I mean, I did feel that. I'll give you an example. If I had a choice between picking up my Air and the XPS, I started picking up the Air. Like if I was doing Android where the dev platform didn't matter, just for the screen. So I like the machine, but my thing is if it's $1,500, I'd probably buy a Mac every day, MacBook Air every day, just because the Air has a significantly better screen. Now, when I bought mine was only $1,000. Mine was like $900 or something, and then tax brought it up over $1,000.
At $1,000, now we're talking a little more reasonable. I mean, this thing.
Yeah, but $1,500 is. I mean, I'll be honest. I'm not $1,500. That's expensive. Like that's, I don't even pay that for Macs, which are notoriously expensive. I'm not sure that I'd pay that for a Dell unless it was a hardcore gaming rig, which that is not. And for most developers.
Yeah,
let's forget about the screen for a minute. But for most developers, that's overkill. Right. I mean, I can do almost all of my work, or all of my work, on my Air with 4 gigs of RAM, and I could do all of my non-Apple work on my XPS 13.
That's so funny to hear you say that because I always hear from developers like when we're speccing machines for them, like, oh, I've got to have literally just got a guy a rig with 32 gigabytes of RAM in his workstation.
So. To be fair, the SSD makes a lot of the difference.
I think so too, yeah.
The machine I'm on now has 8 gigs of RAM, but no SSD, and it feels significantly slower than the Air. Compiles code significantly slower than the Air. The other thing is, if you're running a very heavy IDE like Eclipse with a ton of plugins, or again Visual Studio with a ton of plugins, yes, it's a little worse. I tend to work in lighter weight tools if I'm not working in Xcode.
I think the SSD makes a huge difference, and I don't think people realize it. And we're so used to overcompensating by RAM, so that way applications in the system can cache things in RAM. And we think, well, that must do it. But that SSD makes a massive difference.
Yeah, like I'll be honest, on my Air, I'll run a VM and be coding at the same time, and it's okay. It's fine.
SSDs are probably one of my favorite things of 2012 because I've really made the switch in all of my main systems now. Except for like a couple out in the garage that I use for show production, and I really can tell the difference. SSDs have become my standard deployment now.
Yeah, if I could actually pop open this mini and throw in an SSD, I'd do it.
Yeah.
But of course, that's not possible.
Right.
So, and yeah, I mean, I would say to anyone looking at this XPS, and Chris is going to want to punch me in the face, go to your local Best Buy, Microsoft store, or any other retail outlet and buy the Windows one for less money and throw Ubuntu on it yourself. Because I don't know why they're charging $1,500.
I don't think that's
for
silly.
this.
See, that's practical because then you also have a valid Windows license that you can throw in VMware or you can dual boot.
Well, I mean, granted the specs are lower, but I don't, this doesn't feel like, even just looking at the sheet that you have up, or that I brought it up as well, I don't feel that this is a $1,500 laptop.
Right. Yeah.
Um, I just don't.
You know what's crazy
it's
too
a-
is
it's a good machine.
they actually dropped the price $100 since they announced it even. So it was actually $100 more.
You know, at 1,300 or 1,200,
Yeah, maybe 1,200.
there is an argument. With that
At
screen,
1,000, it's really solid, I think.
at 1,000, but 250. I mean, look at those specs. $1,000, you're not going to.
Yeah, well, you could drop it down to an i5, and you could go.
Are they offering? Because people in the chat are saying support. Are they actually offering Ubuntu support, like a canonical contract? Is that what it is?
I don't know. I'll customize and buy. I mean, Dell's always had some pretty good warranty options.
Yeah, I mean,
So they
that might
have
be what you're
they're
paying
calling it
for.
2-year pro support with 2-year NBD limited online service and remote diagnosis. So remote diagnosis. That's the other thing Dell has is that BIOS that you can boot into, and they kind of then connect to that. So it doesn't really matter what the OS is.
I wonder. This doesn't sound horrible. I wonder if they assume you're going to need more support because it's Ubuntu and not Windows, so they're jacking up the price to make up the cost.
I think what it is, and this is speculation, but they get paid for all that crap they load on Windows boxes, and they actually get paid by, there's lots of different deals with a lot of different people they bundle with, and when they ship an Ubuntu machine, they're not making any of those bundle deals. And that's part of where the revenue comes from on these machines.
I mean, I did notice the System 76, when I first looked at them, was a bit more expensive.
It does, yeah, they're initially higher,
Yeah.
but really, not overly so. Like the laptop that I just got from them.
It's not obscene.
I spec'd the same exact laptop from another builder, and System 76 actually came out a couple $100 cheaper. But sometimes their initial starting price does seem a little higher, yeah. And they don't offer an Ultrabook.
I just don't see people paying this price when they could just as easily go to any retail outlet, buy the Windows one, and dual boot Ubuntu, or just slap Ubuntu on it and pay a little less.
The difference, I think, is like if you really are serious about just wanting to live full-time in Linux or Ubuntu in this case,
right?
And you want that Mac-like hardware is meant to work with the operating system feeling. I mean, that's how the System 76 laptop feels to me. Because
then
every
wouldn't you
hardware
just buy
key
a
works.
System 76?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Who would buy this machine?
Oh, well, see, this is what I'm saying. I don't quite get what Dell's approach is here, because just like you, I would rather buy the cheaper Windows one that's identical, that comes with the Windows 8 license, and then blow that off and put Ubuntu on there, and then virtualize the Windows install.
Yeah, I would dual boot or
that too. I mean, and save myself $250 in the process.
Yeah, but all right, we beat this to death.
Now, what about though? What if that was a 1920 by 1080 display?
Then I think it'd be more in the ballpark, and
right? And see, then
yeah.
but then you're not even asking the same question so much anymore, because now it seems more like a valuable rig, and you're like, okay, I'm sort of willing to pay to have the machine that I want with the operating system I want. And if you have the money, it's kind of nice to vote with your wallet a little bit.
Well, that's how I think they'll get their sales, but
yeah,
I'd like to see the next version.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'd like to see the next version.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, all right, let's move along, David. I hope that helps you.
Yeah.
Maybe it helps your local retailer.
Yeah.
Luke asks, how do I bring my independent study into focus, such that I have a clearer perspective of how to get from idea to app? A little caveat, in his long email that I've boiled down to one sentence, he also mentions that his developer acquaintances and friends are telling him, just code, damn it. I would say, yeah, that is usually what you do. One method I recommend is spec out what you want to build first and just start Googling around and figure out how to do each little set. So break it down into small problems and figure out how to do each little goal and work from there.
So his question is, how do I have this idea, I have this study I've done, and now I want to execute on it and actually convert this great idea into an actual app?
So when he says, he doesn't mean like a school study. He means he's studying programming on his own. So he's being self-taught. Yeah, that's probably the only way to
I would think so.
do that, or probably the best way.
Huh.
I mean, one thing is, clone a very simple 80s arcade game like Pong
Yeah.
or Arkanoid. I say Arkanoid because I like Arkanoid and would like to play another version of it. So, yeah, and just, simple problems like, okay, how do I get the paddle to respond to keyboard clicks? Or to touch if you're doing something with touch? How do I calculate when it hits a brick, let's say you have steel bricks and regular bricks, how fast the ball should return and at what angle? Just small problems. Okay.
All right.
So Jack writes in to recommend lynda.com. Lynda.com is a learning resource for developers, designers, and other folk.
Yeah, it's got a huge video catalog.
Yeah.
I would say have you tried it before?
I've tried it a few years back.
I would say they sometimes go more for the quantity approach than the quality approach. But the other thing is they have such a wide spread of stuff that at one point I just was like randomly I wanted to brush up on my After Effects skills, and sure enough, you go there and they had 5 or 10 different videos on After Effects, and it's like that same thing for every subject. I was just looking at their price is $25 a month though for the catalog. I don't know if they're
a bit pricey. So I use them to kind of brush up on Illustrator because you remember it was years before Yeah, I would also say they're definitely focused on design. Like of the courses I've tried, their design-focused courses seem to be a little better.
Yeah, it's a real scattergun approach, but I suppose if you can't find something, they might be the way to go. The other thing I would say, here's how, with the holiday season in the full swing, I would say maybe ask for it as like a gift. Hey, would you buy me a month of this?
Well, I think they used to have a trial. You can
They
try.
do, yeah, they do, yeah. And there's also a ton all over Usenet of their stuff, so it's a little weird. It's a little weird, but yeah. So I'd say a lukewarm recommendation.
Yeah. All right. So are we back alive? Right? They can hear us, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, right. Your Skype just cut out for a little bit, but I don't think we lost anything.
Yeah, Skype failed me. Yeah. So Johann, let's talk about Johann Sebastian Bach.
So the experience he had here with the Ubuntu Software Center one?
Indeed.
All right, so he is from Sweden, which is awesome that he wrote in from Sweden. And he says, hey guys, just finished listening to this week's episode, and I heard you'd like to hear from some developers that have developed for the Ubuntu Software Center. And then he breaks it out in the abstract. He says, I posted my Python application, which is using Qt, about a month ago to the Ubuntu Software Center. The review process has been rather slow, and it's still pending QA. However, the feedback dialogue between Canonical reviewers and me has been great. They give me some solid tips and whatnot on how to improve my app. One thing that struck me when uploading my app for review is that the lowest price you can set is $2.99. It seems quite high to me, and I'll be the first to say that I think my app is worth around $1, $1.15. The API documentations for lenses, packaging, etc. on their site is decent, but it's mostly a work in progress. Overall experience with the Ubuntu Software Center has been good, and while there are quite a few things they should improve on, the Software Center is absolutely on the way to becoming one of the better app stores for developers. Regarding return on investment, I'll get back to you. And he says, I'm a huge fan of all Jupiter Broadcasting shows and try not to miss a single episode. Keep up the great work, and Merry Christmas from Joan from Sweden. And it's pronounced Johan. From Johan from Sweden. So there you go. So this kind of matches... The ScreenCloud is an app that was a Linux app pick, and I bought it from the Software Center. It was free, but I got it from the Software Center, and it installed missing some dependencies. It installed fine, but then when I went to turn on some of the functionality in the app, it just generated errors. Then I happened just by chance on another machine to download the deb from their website, thinking, well, maybe this won't have the same problem. And sure enough, I installed the deb from the guy's website. No issues when I turn on those same features. So I mentioned this in the Linux Action Show. Well, that developer wrote me back. He saw the show. He got enough traffic from the show that it showed up in his logs, and then he went and tried to figure out what was this all from. And he watches the show now, and now he's emailing me, and he sent me an email, and he said, "Look, I knew this was a problem, the day after it hit the Software Center, and I've been trying to get them to fix it, but what he said that happened, which is kind of interesting, is he packaged it up for them following their specs and sent it to them. And then Canonical opted to repackage it on their own and didn't package it with the correct dependency. So even though he submitted them a functioning deb, at least as far as he knows, they repackaged it from his tar file, I guess, and packaged it incorrectly. And so now his app isn't working properly. The only problem is for the last couple of weeks now, he's been trying to get them to fix it, and it really hasn't gone through yet. So that's a bit of a bummer because it's kind of their bad in the first place. But he also
wait. Why would they not just use the deb you send them?
Well, I don't know. Maybe they looked at it and said, no, who knows, right? Maybe he packaged it wrong or whatever. Although it's doubtful since he told me specifically he sent them the same deb that I downloaded from his website to install.
Right, but what shouldn't they do? So, okay. Let's just take it back a few steps, right? On every other app store that requires an approval process, if you package it wrong, they just reject it.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, Xcode has a tool that will validate it and reject it instantly if you've packaged it wrong. So you don't have to wait a month. That that seems a little strange. Having said that, it could be an oversight. We don't know what dependencies he's using. It could be a licensing issue. For example, if he's using Qt, there are cases where you can't package Qt.
Yeah, it is a Qt thing. It was a Qt dependency, I think.
Right, so Canonical may just be covering themselves illegally by pulling it out.
And he kind of expressed the same thing that Johan expressed here, is that working with them when they are working with them is great, and that they really do seem to be pretty good to work with. It's just sometimes it's slow, and that just to me is an obvious sign of probably a issue that is very pervasive throughout Canonical is understaffing.
Yeah, I mean it's I love to beat them up, but I don't think we have enough information to say they necessarily did something silly.
Right.
Because having read the Qt license, it's extremely likely that they would have been somehow violating it by distributing that binary or that package. I have a feeling they did it to protect themselves, and
Which is interesting because we've had on and off talk on this show about Canonical establishing an SDK for Ubuntu.
Right, and this is another case where a blessed SDK, where they have the license to everything, would be easy, right?
Right, but it makes you wonder with this kind of problem, they're going to have to look at it from an app store perspective, and what can we if we bless this as our SDK, yeah, we either buck up as Canonical and buy the license, or and then anybody who says I use the Ubuntu SDK is then protected. Which is weird, right? For them developing for other distros, that gets weird. Or they have to pick something that doesn't have this problem.
Well, I don't think Canonical will care that you're developing for other distros.
No, but you see, what I'm saying is that's going to be discouraging for people. There's a group of developers out there who are going to want to write their app for all distributions of Linux.
Right. I mean, I can tell you from experience, the Qt license is not cheap. And using the Qt Community Edition without the commercial license can be hard. This doesn't seem like a cut and dry Canonical did the wrong thing situation. This seems like, I mean, it could be, right? But this isn't as clear.
Yeah.
This isn't a clear case. This is, I would give them the benefit of the doubt in something like this. And that's kind of why I've been so passionate about just have a blessed SDK, right? And if you really want to be an Ubuntu dev, just conform to it.
You really can't even offer yourself up as a serious commercial space contender without one, really.
Well, you can, but then you have to deal with all these weird issues. Right? Like, so I'm not a lawyer. I don't know if this developer didn't have a license to the commercial Qt, and if Canonical had put that on the App Store with the code in it, or with the binary in it, would they have been liable? I have no idea. I'm assuming, based on their actions, that that's probably the case, where they erred on the side of caution. Now, there's so many other frameworks, right? Mono, how would that work? I think Mono actually would be fine. But what about, what happens to them in these cases, like with all these commercial frameworks, commercial licenses, or these half open source licenses? And I think that's an issue they need to deal with. And I don't know what the answer is. Like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's up to them.
Yeah, so Monster Cameron asks, because I think this could be an interesting repeated point of feedback.
Right.
If Qt is troublesome, why is KDE using it? And it's not so much a blanket Qt thing. It's just like it could be the binary this guy is using or whatever. It could be something specific.
So the deal with Qt is you can use Qt at no cost to you. Problem is, if you want to include Qt in your application, so like the dependencies, you have to pay the license.
See, the part I don't get is why they don't just pull it from the repo. So just, you just flag it as a dependency, and
because that would circumvent the probably Nokia or whoever runs Qt now. I forgot the new company's name. I mean, I think they don't want to be in that position, right? Because what does that do to middleware vendors? Because the whole deal you make with Qt is you can essentially, while you're developing, develop for free. Then you either have to prompt your users to go download it, or you have to pony up the license when you want to ship. And I'm not sure if Canonical wants to kind of mess up that business model for people.
Yeah.
It's fine. I mean, I don't think this is a Qt problem. I don't think this is a Canonical problem. We had a dependency episode. A dependency is more than a technical dependency, right? There is a legal and business problems to using certain dependencies.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows? No one knows. I mean, Chris, you could be right. Canonical could just be being silly right now.
No, I think you're probably right. I don't think that is the case.
But I have a feeling that they're going to have to become more careful about stuff like this. So why not now? But we'll see. Who knows? I have no idea how they would approach this.
Stay tuned to find out.
Yeah, I would say, Johan, we'd love to, like you mentioned, I'd love to hear your results.
Mm-hmm.
Stick with it. Again, it's very new.
The price point thing's interesting too.
That's strange. Yeah, what was it?
$299.
$299 is the lowest price.
Yeah.
I like that, but I'm almost wondering if there's an arbitrary reason for that.
Like the processing fees and whatnot.
Because I know when I went to buy something on the Canonical store, the processing was cost prohibitive to buy from the US,
mm-hmm.
along with the shipping. So I have a feeling that has less to do with a statement on, hey, you should charge for software, and more about, we won't know, right? I would say stick with it for now, see how it goes. I hope it goes well.
Yeah, let us know.
All right, so another popular topic. Russell shares regarding helping his friend or girlfriend learn programming via Code Academy. He writes, ultimately, we came to the conclusion that learning from a book or a more rigorous source is far better for actually learning a language, obviously programming language. But Code Academy is still useful for a quick reminder of stuff like syntax. I've used Code School to learn Ruby and didn't have any of these issues. I suppose the lesson you learn is you get what you pay for.
That's an interesting. That is an interesting observation. I think that's because Code School is a little more structured.
I would say also Code School. Yeah, it's a little more structured and it's designed to be much more rigorous, I think.
We haven't had anyone take advantage of the Code School offer for a week or so, 2 even, I think. So if you are maybe going to have a little time over the holiday season, don't forget we have the affiliate links at the bottom of our website, and we have a Code School link down there. If you click that before you go to Code School, then we'll make a few bucks if you sign up. And Code School is an online way to learn by doing. They have different courses for different things that you probably should know about if you don't at this point. Also, they're focusing a lot on iOS, so if you feel like jumping in the world of iOS, what? Yes,
I don't like competition.
I know. Or maybe Ruby or Git, CSS, maybe a little Rails action, something like that.
Go ahead and take the Git course too, please.
Yes. Well, that one's free. The Try Git, that's free.
Yeah.
So
just do that.
Well, they really do. They really do have one hell of a site, don't they?
No, the production quality on the courses is very, very good.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's just really something. So, anyways, Code School linked to the bottom of our website, as well as Amazon, eBay, Netflix, Newegg, ThinkGeek, any of those kinds of sites you might use for your holiday shopping, any of the great ones online. If you click there before you shop, a portion of your shopping sessions contributed to us.
All right, Chris, why don't you go ahead and read John's that I've helpfully pasted into the
Very nice, sir. John writes, after your last C++ show, I got all fired up to learn C++. I've heard many times how bad Java guys are C. What? I've heard many times how bad Java guys are C++. So I'm trying my best not to suck too much. All right, so he's admitting that he's a Java guy and he might have a problem. Then he comes in and he says, one thing I don't quite understand is where C++ coders go for much of the API that is I'm used to using with Java, i.e. stuff like HTTP libraries, XML manipulation stuff, database integration, etc., etc. I know Qt has a lot, but so far, all my C++ applications have just turned into Qt applications, and I feel like I'm somewhat missing the point. That's deep.
Okay, so I would say, John, your issue is less to do with Qt, and it's more, do you like big frameworks or small libraries to do a job? Qt is undoubtedly a huge framework, right? There's a good analogy to be made to Rails, because if you're writing a Ruby Rails app, you're really writing Rails, not Ruby, at some point. It sounds like you want a collection of small libraries to do these things. The issue is when you do that, you give up a lot of the convenience that Qt would have given you.
Right.
I would say, now, full disclosure, I'm actually in the same boat. I like Qt, but I'm not sure I want to dive whole hog into Qt just yet for everything I do. I'd say go on GitHub or code.google.com or Bitbucket and take a look at C++ libraries. I mean, you can Google C++ lib, JSON parsing or XML parsing. There has to be thousands of them. These aren't uncommon things. I would say a lot of the C++ devs I know tend to roll their own, or they're Microsoft devs and just use what's built into that. In fact, I think they're all Microsoft devs. So I don't know what platform you're developing on or for. If you're using Qt, it's probably not Windows. So I would Google around and see what you come up with. I mean, you could always roll your own library. If you like things a certain way, I mean, that's how jQuery got created. You like things a certain way. You just go ahead and roll your own if you don't like what's out there. But yeah, I can't really help you much beyond that. If you don't like the feel of Qt, you just don't like it.
Well, and he feels like all his C++ applications are really they're just Qt apps. So what's the point? What's the point?
Well, I mean, the point is that it'll perform better than a desktop Java app, right? I mean, there's still a point to use C++.
Right.
I mean, it sounds to me like his issue is he feels like he's writing Qt, not C++.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of getting from it. And
and that's a real issue. I mean, and unfortunately, Qt is one of those frameworks that's so big that that's how it is. I mean, if you don't like it, leave. Use something else. Listen, there is tons of other libraries you could use, right? You can even roll your own. There's no reason you have to feel held hostage to Qt. So that's all I have, Chris.
That's wise, man. That's wise.
Yeah.
Now, folks, if you'd like to send us feedback to the show, you can email us coderradio@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or you can pop that contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website and then choose Coder Radio from that list and then email it into us. All right, should we move on to our favorite things? Our favorite things. How was that? That was pretty good, right?
Our favorite things.
Wasn't that pretty good? Our favorite. Where do we start with this? You want to start with gadgets?
We could start with gadgets. Let's talk about I don't know, the Nexus Q.
Oh, come on. You're just trolling. That's not on the favorite things list. I see now. I want it, but while we're on Nexus, I think I don't know if the 7. Do you think the 7 now qualifies as a favorite? It's definitely.
It's one of my, because to me it's the first really competitive Android tablet.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely that. It's really like Google really pulled it out this year. Yeah. And what I was most impressed with by the Nexus 7 was how they restrained themselves in a few elements of it. Like they held back on the 3G because they didn't feel like they had it right yet, and they held back on a rear-facing camera to save cost, and because they're not really necessary on a tablet. And there's just a few things that shows that I think Google really got what you have to do to make a good tablet is it's just about as much as what you put into it as what you don't put into it, because it's a real tricky balance between mobility, power, and weight and all this kind of, and battery. And they nailed it with the Nexus 7. And that, I think, is the underreported aspect of it, and a very encouraging sign that they're going to continue to make solid products like this. I think the Nexus 4 is a lot like that too, although maybe too much compromise. But
yeah, I feel like the Nexus 4, I guess too much compromise is the way to put it. I don't, I just can't see myself buying a phone without LTE in 2012 or 2013.
yeah, I would have disagreed until I got to play with it. I'm like, holy crap, LTE is the way of the future. And
Yeah.
it's really fast. So yeah.
Although obviously the numbers don't agree with me, and folks are buying it like it's going out of style.
Yeah, they just issued an apology.
Or Google has severe inventory issues, depending on,
Well, whatever it is, Google's like, we're sorry, guys. We're really sorry about that. And that just came out. So, as far as gadgets go, that's up there. My wife really likes her iPad mini. I don't know if I can't put that on my list of favorite things, but it's also a solid competitor. The iPad continues to be a pretty good competitor in that space.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about the iPad mini. I don't think it's one of my favorite things this year, to be honest. I feel like the iPad mini is more compromised than the
Yeah.
Nexus 7 in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I feel like with the Nexus 7 compromised, because Google has all right, let's face it, an awful relationship with carriers. I feel like Apple just compromised the mini just to keep those ridiculous margins.
Well, and it's a little thinner, right? And it has better battery than the 7.
It's a little thinner and has better battery, but
Yeah.
to me, when I think Apple mobile devices, the killer feature for them is Retina, right? It is a super high-res screen. To not have it feels like a big compromise to me.
Yeah, and I would have expected it only just because you would think they'd want that to be the Apple thing. Oh, Apples are known for having really good displays.
Yeah.
Except for the mini.
I mean, of course it has a good display.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. It's not as good as the 7, I don't think, though.
Well, I don't know about that. I'd say they're about the same.
Oh, really? I haven't really looked at them side by side much.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of, it's certainly not a bad device, but I wouldn't put it as one of my favorites. It's going to sound weird, but when we did talk about it earlier, one of my favorite machines this year has actually been the XPS 13.
Even though I just dogged on it for 5 minutes?
Even though we dogged on it for like 5 minutes, it's, even if you forget about the Ubuntu aspects, it's actually not at that price point, but at the lower price point that I got, that it was before, is a decent machine. And it's a step forward, I think, for Ultrabook manufacturers, right? I mean, this year, I'd say non-Apple laptops have come a long way in terms of performance and, design.
Mm-hmm.
From a development point of view, definitely liked that Git has become a lot more popular. I feel like even this year it grew tremendously. Because it's almost become like, the de facto source control system.
Right, yeah.
With a few exceptions. And even like organizations that are on SVN, you can, even their own staff feel that it's antiquated.
And it's really no longer like that weird, like when you go to a project to eventually
Right.
wind up on their Git page, and it's just kind of like not, and like, okay, I know what to do here because I'm here all the time. So GitHub has gotten huge this year. And do you contribute that mostly to just, mobile development accelerating and things like that, and just more and more people needing something like this?
I think GitHub was actually helped a lot by the Rails community.
Yeah.
Because remember, a lot of the official Rails stuff is hosted on GitHub.
Uh-huh.
GitHub is a blessed source of official gems for Ruby as well. So I shouldn't say just Rails. I would say the Ruby community.
Hell, the Linux kernel was up there for quite a while.
Yeah, but Linus doesn't like GitHub, and he has legitimate reasons, right? I mean, there are certain things that GitHub kind of does differently than pure Git.
Mm.
Having said that, it's weird. A lot of their strengths are actually in terms of UI, right? User interface. For instance, I don't know if you've ever used the network feature.
No.
It draws out a graph of who committed what when with the commit notes, and you can just see exactly what was going on.
Oh, that's cool.
Now, Bitbucket in their most recent UI overhaul that happened about 2 months ago did add a lot of those type of features and really brought it back into a more modern looking system. But GitHub started with all of that. I'd also say analytics have been very important to me
Oh
this
yeah,
year.
sure.
And
App level analytics, or what type of analytics?
Apple doesn't give analytics.
No, app level, like like because there's like a third party like little tracking.
Yeah, like Google Analytics.
Yeah,
Google Analytics to a point, but I haven't used it on everything because I feel like it can get a little too aggressive.
sure.
Server side analytics have actually been a big deal, and this will
Wow.
go into a little bit of the cloud solutions. When you're paying by cost instead of just paying something a month, it becomes really important to optimize things. Um, like I don't know, Chris, you're totally on Scale Engine, right?
hmm
Have you ever tried Heroku or anything like that?
I've experimented a little bit, and with a few others too. Um,
Okay.
they're all are really neat systems.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I think those definitely came into their own this year.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting, huh? The whole, the whole. Do you think maybe it was started even more a little bit last year? But the whole like, you log in, create an account, and within 20 minutes you can set up a server
Yeah.
or you can set up a CDN. That is such a huge shift from like even when I started Jupiter Broadcasting, where when Jupiter Broadcasting launched, I had a single server, Linux box, I set up Apache, I set up MySQL, I set up PHP, then I copied over, WordPress via FTP and got it all, and I built a server for a day, and that was jupiterbroadcasting.com, right? Which is today would just be I would look at that and go, what a waste of time. Why would
Yeah.
anybody do it like that?
You would write the site and then git push and be done.
You're right.
I mean, that itself is huge. That has become mainstream this year.
I also really am starting to feel like, and it's not where it needs to be yet, but kind of tied in with the distribution element is, endpoint bandwidth really seems to be going up. We have more and more people now listening live to our shows from their mobile phones, which is now you're starting to blur the lines with radio when you have people that are in their car and
Yeah.
they got their audio streaming and they're listening over their speakers. That's pretty crazy, and it's like this combination of accessible distribution software and hardware that I'm able to use, and then on their end, a reliable mobile network and a decent smartphone. It's a pretty crazy time, and you start to really think how things could actually cloud type stuff really could start to work. Stuff really could start to go online on a little more permanent basis when connectivity is starting to get so widespread.
Well, it's interesting. I was evaluating co-location facilities about a month back,
Right.
and I'm just looking at the prices of some of these cloud companies. It's almost not worth the effort. And obviously, cloud is more expensive by a pretty big margin. But just I think about all the effort of setting up a colo. I'm like, it's they're definitely coming into their own. And one thing I'm betting on for 2013 is that the prices will continue to drop.
Oh, I hope so, because it is not. They're not there yet. Like if I didn't,
Yeah, they're expensive.
if I didn't know about Scale Engine, I don't think on the profit margins that I operate there is no profit margin. I wouldn't be able to. There would be. I would be so in the red to like if I used Amazon to distribute or Akamai or Rackspace, I wouldn't be able to do it. So there's still this definitely premium price that is starting to, I think, price some people out. And the only reason we're really able to get away with it so far is because there's still these like old school stragglers who do things the cheap way. Like I'm thinking of like we do our audio distribution through Libsyn, and Libsyn doesn't charge by bandwidth; they charge by storage. And since I'm only doing MP3s, I get a crazy amount of distribution for a relatively cheap price. But they're struggling. They're barely making it, I think.
Sure.
And I wonder as those types of things might start to go away, and things like Rackspace and Amazon EC2 and things like that are our only options, the price point could actually start to get to be a little too high for the indie developer, or the indie media producer in my case.
Yeah, I there's definitely going to be some price pressure downward, I think.
I hope.
A listener actually turned me on to a company called Six Sync, the numeral 6 and then the word, sync.
Yeah.
They have a very interesting model. So it's kind of VPS, but they're offering a lot more. Well, it is a VPS basically, but they're offering a lot more support, and I think that's where a lot of companies are going to differentiate themselves in 2013.
That's interesting. Like they right on their front page, it's so they're packaging a VPS with PHP or Rails or Node.js.
Yeah, it's very odd. It's like
Well, no, I mean, think about it. When you want to spin up a VPS, that's just part of the problem. Then you also have the whole software stack that
Right.
you have to have working. And and I guess if you did it right, that would kind of justify. Well, their prices actually aren't that bad.
Prices
Well, I don't know.
their bandwidth is a little low. That's one of the things I noticed. Right
See,
off
like
the bat.
a 400 gigabytes of bandwidth, we blow through that in an afternoon
Yeah.
for this show.
I'm also thinking, remember, for
Yeah.
API endpoints.
Totally, yeah. For something that's just text back and forth.
Yeah, you could reasonable. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure I would ever go with that nano plan, but the mini plan could probably do something for me.
And this is interesting. It makes a lot of sense that guys like this might get kind of focused.
Yeah.
And if I was
why
gonna,
not?
yeah, exactly. If I needed a VPS to host this kind of thing, I'd want somebody who's focusing on that. Why not? Why not?
Yeah.
It's a good differentiator.
It's definitely interesting, and they're selling on the basis of that Biscuit tool, and not they're really not selling the way traditional VPS hosts have in the past. If you and I would encourage anyone to take a look at their site, they're really pushing their tooling rather than we're the cheapest VPS you could possibly get.
Yeah, they offer. Yeah, that's interesting. Meet Biscuit, they call it. Biscuit, hands down the best virtual machine control interface you will find, from VPS and DNS management to backups, perks, and billing, all packaged in a nice interface for your enjoyment. Yeah, they should be a sponsor.
They should.
They'd make a good sponsor. So that's an interesting thing, right? You combine things like VPSs with things like CDNs and, guys like Alan and Scale Engine who are actually offering competitive rates, and then things like app stores for distributing. You really can just be a small one-person, two-person shop actually selling an app. But at the same time, we see those stats in the App Store where they're saying like only the top 20 actually make money, right? What was it?
It's the top 25 developers make like 90% of the revenue.
So how do you get over that? See, and how that seems to be the big
we
problem.
talked about this. We talked about this 2 weeks ago, and my argument was very few people are going to get over that. Business models are going to have to change, and they are changing, right? I would encourage anyone to listen back to the mobile retrospective. It's going to be harder, but it's not going to be impossible, and it's still going to be easier than it ever was before the app stores.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to distribute. I mean, distribution was impossible previously.
See, I was just kind of wondering. I'm just kind of wondering if you're not going to see things sort of specialize out. I don't know how you do it in the Apple App Store, but I'm wondering if you wouldn't see an app store that's more focused on utility type applications. App stores we already see ones that are more focused on games. Monster Cameron terms is maybe an app store that's better community focused, and those kinds of things. More of like an indie app store. So like the Humble Bundle folks, maybe 5 years down the road, release an app store and it's only indie humble games, and their whole payment model is baked into the app store from the very get-go. Wouldn't that be interesting?
Right. Well, one thing you also have to remember: a failure to a large company could be a wild success for a small company.
Yeah. Well, look at the Daily, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, they spent almost $1 million per issue.
It's crazy.
I mean, they were burning cash. I mean, that's stuff. Having looked at their app as an iOS developer, I have no idea how they spent that much money, what they claim, developing the software.
Because they had 100. Oh well, yeah. They also had like 100-person newsroom and all of this.
Yeah. Well, no, they said their development cost was almost $1 million by itself. So I would have loved that contract.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Right, that one. Well, I guess back to the point we were trying to make here is that I do agree that the whole online services thing is definitely one of the better elements of 2012. And before the show, I was down on what are some of the things I could come up with, because I was thinking more physical goods.
Right.
And I wasn't really thinking cloud computing, but it really has been kind of a big deal. And it really is even affecting how I do business. I really now I take pretty much full advantage of all kinds of cloud applications to do these shows. And I wouldn't have thought it would have been like this even a year ago so much.
Yeah, I think this is going to continue on into 2013, to the point where I think colo providers are going to feel some heat.
Yeah.
If they're not already.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, there you go. Is that the show?
I think that's the show. We can actually end on time today.
I like that. So don't forget, folks, that we're going to do an extra show this week and focus on indie gaming on Wednesday. And that'll be at 9 a.m. Pacific and noon Eastern over at jblive.tv or jblive.info for the audio. Also, you can email us, coderradio@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or hit the contact link. And Mr. Dominic, where should people follow you throughout the week?
I recommend they find me on Google+. My name is Michael Dominic, at Twitter at Dumanuka, or on my website, mdominic.com.
And don't forget to go check out Code Journal over at codejournalapp.com.
That's right.
And join us on Wednesday for a special episode, which will be out next week. So don't get too excited. It's not like it's nothing too... No, come on, simmer down. Stop it. All right. We'll see you Wednesday.